I remember hearing this statistic when I was growing up, and the statistic was that 50% of all marriages end in divorce in the United States. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, how discouraging is that? You know, I mean, my parents weren't married, and I didn't know that many people in my life who had successful marriages or even relationships. So, I mean, for me, it was something that always sat in the back of my mind and sort of ate away at me a little bit like, could I ever get married? Is that possible? In terms of my own personal life, I've been in several long-term relationships, and the longest one I've been in, I've never been married, was 5 years. So I have learned a lot of little gems and lessons along the way in all of my long-term relationships. And I wanted to talk about some of the things I've learned, specifically how to have an honest conversation with your significant other. So I'm going to share some gems today and some jewels. I personally am a very emotional person. I'm a very hot-headed person. I have a temper. And not until recently was I able to learn how to calm myself down, talk to myself, and operate not from a place of that temper, but from a place of peace. And honey, that was not easy. That was not easy. I had to really learn how to work through my emotions and become more aware of what was going on with myself. But I was known for going from 0 to 100 in seconds, right? And people would know that I would lash out on them if I was in a relationship. And honey, that's no way to be in a loving relationship. That's not a way to talk to people. No one likes to be yelled at. No one is listening to you when you are yelling at them. And I had to learn that the hard way from going through many relationships where I wasn't listened to because I wasn't communicating correctly. And I think the majority of us don't communicate correctly. We don't know how to communicate. And because we don't know how to communicate, what we end up doing is we react and we lash out and we come from a place of fear because it's easier to come from a place of fear, right? Fear, anger, insecurity, and blame all that and channel all that energy to the other person and to blame everything outside of ourselves for how we're feeling instead of checking in with ourselves about how we're feeling first before we engage and get angry at someone else. So how do you then have an honest conversation with someone when you are feeling a mixture of emotions, right? When you're feeling like frustrated, angry, upset, depressed, sad, all of these things that we often feel as human beings. How do you have an honest conversation with your significant other when you are going through that? Well, the thing is, you don't. Yes, I said it. You don't. When you are at that point where you are feeling emotional, angry, upset, frustrated, all of those things, that is not a time for you to have an honest conversation with someone else. Because you're not going to come from a place of being calm, being honest, being self-aware. No, you're going to come from a place of anger and fear. So what do you need to do first? You need to take some time to step back and sit with how you're feeling. I'll take myself for an example. When I was growing up, I was super emotional and everything hurt my feelings. Words, people's tone, everything could trigger me and make me upset. People would be like, oh my God, Julie, you're so sensitive. Yes, I know. I'm still sensitive. But I would put on my armor and I would always be on the defensive right? Instead of being open and trying to understand. So what would I do? Instead of listening to what the other person was actually saying, I would lash out and say stuff like, well, why are you saying it like that? And why are you talking to me like that? And if you hadn't said it like this whole thing wouldn't happen in the first place. Notice I use a lot of you, and I point a lot of fingers, and I play the victim. And honestly, when we play the victim, it's acting small. It's like you don't want to take responsibility for yourself. You don't want to own up to your power. You don't want to be real about what's going on. And I couldn't do that for my whole life. I couldn't be an adult, a 33-year-old that I am now, and do that. That's not fair. That's not fair to myself. That's not fair to my partner. That's not fair to my friends. That's not fair to anyone. So what I had to learn how to do was start to sit with my emotions and own them for myself and take responsibility for how I was feeling and not blaming anyone outside of myself for how I was feeling. And I had to come to terms with asking myself, why am I feeling this way? And I developed this system where I started asking myself 3 questions. And I want to encourage you to ask yourself 3 questions, these 3 questions too. And the 3 questions are, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And how can I approach this situation in a loving and honest way? So, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And how can I approach this situation in an honest and loving way? Now, is that easy? No, definitely not. That's not easy to do. When you're upset, you just want to yell. You want to lash out at the other person. You want to kick a tree. You want to do whatever you need to do to get your anger out, right? I mean, that's just normal. That's the way that we operate when we're operating from a place of, being kind of selfish. But when you're thinking about it from a more relationship perspective, when you're thinking about it from a more honest and loving perspective, it's a game changer. It's a different way of operating. And I want to point out in those 3 questions, it's not about you did this and you did that. It's about I feel this and I feel that and I need this and I need that, and that's what's the most important part. Often when we get into arguments, when we get into conflicts with people, what we tend to do is we tend to say you did this and you did that, and if you didn't do this then it never would have happened. And instead, what I am encouraging you to do is put emphasis on I. The reason we don't want to put emphasis on I is because it's really hard to admit when we're wrong. It's really hard to admit when we are hurting. It's really hard to admit when we're triggered by something. And it's really hard to be vulnerable enough to open up to people and share how we're feeling. It's hard. That's the most challenging thing for me. Even though I'm a really emotional person, it's really hard for me to deep down say how I really feel about something. It's much easier to tell somebody how they're behaving and why it's annoying or why it's making me angry. That's a lot easier. But, if you want to have a successful relationship, a successful friendship, one that has healthy boundaries, one that is going to grow, one that's going to challenge you to grow, you really have to tap into that. You really have to tap into yourself, your own emotions. So what I'm going to challenge you to do today, what I'm going to encourage you to do today is I want you, next time you have a conflict, next time you feel a surge of anger coming up and you feel this emotion start to bubble inside of you, I want you to take a pause and sit with those emotions for a minute. Now, that may mean that you're in the same room with your significant other and you have to say, you know what? I'm feeling a lot of different feelings. I need to take a break. I need to step away. Because I don't really want to respond the way that I really want to respond right now. I don't want to be that way towards you. That's honest. And you step aside and you take a break. And while you're taking that break and you're sitting with how you feel, you're not shutting down, no, which is another thing that we do a lot, right? We're not shutting down or doing the silent treatment. What we are doing is looking within and we're asking, why am I feeling this way? How can I start to approach the situation in a loving way? And you might have to, like how I'm doing, you might have to close your eyes and visualize your inner self. Visualize a beam of light that you're talking to, you know, of loving, warm energy. Visualize that. And then once you've sat with those 3 questions of what am I feeling, why am I feeling it, and how can I approach this in a loving situation, only then do you go back and, you know, make sure your partner is ready too, or your friend or whomever you're having the conflict with, to talk about it. Because then you're operating from a place of understanding instead of what typically happens in an argument where you're listening so that you can make your next argument, right? Or you're listening to what the other person's saying, but you're not really listening. You're more listening so you can find out what's flawed in what they're saying so that you can say something to contradict what they're saying or tell them why they're wrong. And that never reaches a solution. So when we have conflict, we have to be able to approach it with a goal in mind, a goal of listening to understand and coming to a solution. You know, if you approach something in that way, where you're coming towards a conflict with the idea of reaching a goal of a solution, that's major, because then both people are in it for a reason as opposed to in it for a fight. And, you know, it takes 2 people to tango, honey. So it's not like in this situation, if you've done the work, you know, and then you approach the situation and, you know, your significant other hasn't or your friend hasn't, then it can be kind of hard to have this kind of mature, organized, peaceful conversation. So what I encourage you to do today is share this video with your loved ones. You know, write down these questions, put them on your fridge, put them on your nightstand, put them somewhere where you can see them, and both make an agreement to commit to practicing these questions. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, honey. No, when you first approach this is not going to be easy. It's still not that easy for me. And, you know, it's something that I work on with my partner. It's not easy, but it's helpful. And the idea is that you practice and you work at it and you make a commitment to it every single day, right? So that when conflict does arise, you can easily both come to the table, having sat and taken your own personal time to work through it. And then you come as mature, self-aware beings to the table. You can change your life because you can make a commitment to becoming self-aware of your feelings and working towards practicing goals to work at a solution. If this video was helpful for you, please share it with your friends, your community, and let me know how this process works for you. Have a beautiful, amazing, love-filled day. Much love to you. Enjoy your day, and thank you for listening.